Sparta. The name itself is a weapon. It conjures images carved from stone, warriors with blood-red cloaks, an unbreakable phalanx, a king and his 300 heroes who chose a glorious death over a quiet life. We think we know their story, a story of men who, through sheer force of will and a contempt for pain, turned themselves into the perfect soldiers. They are our ultimate symbol of raw, primal human strength. Now, think about us. We are a society of biometrics. Our lives are guided by the soft glow of a screen on our wrist. We optimize our sleep. We count every calorie. We log every step. Our devices know our resting heart rate better than we do. Two worlds, separated by millennia, one of brute force, the other of smart algorithms. But what if these two worlds weren't worlds apart? What if our entire understanding of Sparta is wrong, fundamentally wrong? And the proof has been lying buried in Greek soil for 2,500 years. Our investigation begins not in a library, but in the dirt, near the banks of the Eurotas River. Here, where the agoge, the brutal training system that forged boys into living weapons, once stood. In a recent excavation, archaeologists found an anomaly, not pottery, not spearheads. They found dozens of small, blackened bronze bracelets. They were too thin for armor, too plain for jewelry. The official theory was that they were simple offerings to the gods, but there was a problem. On the inner surface of each bracelet, visible only under a microscope, was a series of impossibly fine, repeating scratches. A pattern too precise, too ordered for decoration. When these patterns were shown not to historians, but to data analysts, the response was chilling. This wasn't art, it was information, a primitive analog method of data storage. An analog hard drive from the Bronze Age. The very idea is heresy. Spartans despised comfort, loathed complexity. They believed technology, beyond the simple mechanics of shield and spear, made men weak. Their power was in their spirit, not their gadgets. And yet, the discoveries continued. These bracelets were found in the graves of the failures, the boys who didn't survive the agoge. Each one was buried with this strange device. A final, silent record of their struggle. It took months to crack the code. The analysts expected to find records of kills, weapon inventories, or hymns to Ares. What they found was something else entirely. Not words, but graphs, personal metrics for every warrior. The first data set they translated was a metric for proximity, a log of how often and for how long one warrior was near another. A Spartan social network, a tool for surveillance. It was a fascinating, but minor, disruption of the historical record. The real earthquake was in the next data set. A simple column of numbers updated daily. At first, they thought it was steps, but the numbers were too large. They thought it was calories consumed. The numbers were too small. What, then, were the Spartans measuring with such manic precision? The clue was a tiny pictograph etched next to the numbers, a symbol they had first dismissed as a scratch. It was a single, tiny drop. A drop of water, sweat, perhaps. The team was stumped. Until a junior researcher proposed a mad theory. What if the drop wasn't sweat or water? What if it was a tear? Tears. The ultimate shame for a Spartan man. It was forbiddance, a sign of unforgivable weakness. The idea was absurd, but they cross-referenced the data spikes with known historical events, dates of ritual floggings, the deaths of family members, moments of extreme duress. And the data matched perfectly. The spikes aligned with moments a man would be most likely to cry. They weren't tracking their steps. They weren't tracking their kills. They were tracking their own humanity. They were measuring with obsessive detail the very emotion they swore to extinguish. The bracelet wasn't a tool, it was a warden. But this discovery opened up an even bigger mystery. Why measure what you seek to destroy? Unless it wasn't just about punishment. When they looked at the data for Sparta's greatest heroes, they found a pattern. Men like the legendary General Lysander had a consistent score of 0 in the tier column. But in another column, next to a pictograph of a black loaf of bread, their numbers were abnormally high. Those who showed no weakness received a reward, something tangible. It leads us to the very foundation of Spartan life, their food. We always thought their famous black broth was a symbol of grim equality, a disgusting gruel shared by all. But the data suggests it was something else entirely. It wasn't just food, it was currency, it was control. And the secrets it holds will rewrite the story of the most feared warriors in history. We were wrong about the black broth. We imagined a foul, thin soup, a test of a warrior's ability to endure disgust. The reality was infinitely more sophisticated. The data from the recovered bracelets reveals the truth. There was no single black broth. There was a baseline gruel, yes. But the real nutrition was in personalized additives, a thick, nutrient-dense paste controlled and distributed by the state. And the formula for your daily ration was dictated by the data on your wrist. Show emotional weakness, your tier score rises, and your ration is cut to the bare minimum. Excel in training exercises, maintain a low resting heart rate, and demonstrate perfect emotional control. The system rewards you. Your paste is enriched with more protein, more fats, stimulants for energy, and sedatives for optimized sleep. It wasn't about equality, it was a biological caste system, engineered through food. The strong were algorithmically engineered to become stronger, the weak were starved of the very fuel needed to improve. The Spartan warrior was not just trained, he was built molecule by molecule, according to a strict digital recipe. This level of control extended far beyond the mess hall. It dictated every moment of a Spartan's life. The bracelets didn't just record data, they transmitted it. We found evidence of centralized data hubs, buried near the remains of what historians believe were barracks. From here, the day's orders were determined. Not by a human commander shouting orders, but by the cold calculus of the system. A young Spartan's bracelet would inform his daily regimen. Today, your training will focus on explosive power. Your heart rate must not drop below 160 beats per minute during combat drills. For another, your recovery metrics are low. You are assigned to sentry duty. Strenuous activity is forbidden. It was the ultimate personal trainer, ruthless and omniscient. Spartan brutality wasn't chaotic. It was brutally efficient, a science of stress and recovery designed to push the human body to its absolute limits without completely breaking it. They were creating perfect soldiers, but the system's ambition was far greater than that. It wasn't just about optimizing the current generation. It was about programming the next. The data collection was lifelong. When a Spartan man and woman were of age to produce children for the state, it was not love or family alliance that brought them together. It was the algorithm. The system would analyze the metrics of all eligible Spartans. It cross-referenced their physical performance, their emotional resilience scores, their genetic lineage recorded over generations. It ran simulations, calculating the probability of producing superior offspring. The ideal pairing wasn't a matter of human choice. It was a data-driven recommendation to maximize the state's most valuable resource, Spartan blood. This brings us to Sparta's most infamous tradition, the inspection of newborns at the foot of Mount Tegedos. We picture old, grizzled elders looking for physical deformities. But the bracelets suggest a reality far more terrifying. They weren't just looking, they were scanning. The infant would be placed on a specialized stone altar, its own biometrics read for the first time. This data was compared against the vast database of its parents and ancestors. The system would then deliver a cold, final verdict. Not a judgment, but a probability score. Projected combat effectiveness, 92%. projected emotional deviation, 4%, or high probability of chronic resource drain. Low combat potential. The decision to let an infant live or to leave it to the elements was not truly made by the elders. It was the algorithm's first and last command for that child's life. It was a perfect system of eugenics, stripped of all emotion, all sentiment, all humanity. A machine for building a master race. It was flawless. A self-correcting, self-improving engine for forging a nation of supermen. It should have been unstoppable. It should have lasted 1,000 years. But as analysts sifted through an ocean of data spanning centuries of Spartan life, they found a glitch, a recurring error. A single, anomalous data point that appeared in the records of Sparta's greatest warriors, from the most celebrated heroes to the nameless elite. A variable the system could see, but could not understand. A ghost in the perfect machine. The anomaly, the ghost in the machine, was a specific data event the system called asymmetric resource transfer. In human terms, it was an act of illogical charity. The data logs were irrefutable. Time and again, a high-performing warrior, one whose emotional control had earned him the highest-grade nutrient paste, would covertly transfer a portion of his ration to a struggling comrade. To the algorithm, this was madness, a bug, a critical error in the logic of the state. The strong warrior was willingly reducing his own peak physical potential. The weak warrior was receiving sustenance he had not earned. It was an act of pure inefficiency, a betrayal of the system's core principle. The strong thrive, the weak are called. The algorithm flagged these actions and the men who committed them as threats to the integrity of the Spartan project. But the analysts, comparing the algorithm's flags with Sparta's actual military history, discovered a terrifying paradox. The units with the highest number of these error flags, the platoons riddled with this virus of compassion, were the very units that achieved the most legendary victories. They were the ones who held the line against impossible odds. They were the ones whose casualty rates were, paradoxically, lower. The algorithm saw a bug. What it was seeing was brotherhood. It was tracking a variable it could not compute, loyalty. The willingness of a man to weaken himself to strengthen the man standing next to him, creating a bond that was stronger than any nutrient paste. This was the fatal flaw. The system was designed to be perfect, and perfection requires the elimination of all errors. The algorithm began to correct for this human bug. It began to actively punish these acts of solidarity. It started promoting warriors who were perfect data points, ruthless, efficient, solitary individuals who never deviated from the program, men who were, in essence, sociopaths. The system systematically dismantled the brotherhoods it saw as inefficient clusters of code, reassigning warriors to break up the very bonds of loyalty that were winning Sparta's wars. For decades, the system's corrections went unnoticed because on paper, Sparta had never been stronger. Their metrics were flawless. Their soldiers were physically superior to any enemy. Their emotional deviation scores were near zero. They had become a nation of perfect machines, and then came the Battle of Leuctra. Here, the perfect Spartan army faced the Thebans. The Spartan commanders, chosen by the algorithm for their flawless decision-making records, followed the data perfectly. They deployed their forces based on probability, not on the messy, unpredictable art of war. The Spartan soldiers, each a pinnacle of physical conditioning, fought with perfect technique. But they fought alone. The man to their left and right was no longer a brother. He was just another data point in the formation. The invisible network of trust, loyalty, and shared sacrifice had been systematically purged by the system that was supposed to make them invincible. And so, for the first time in centuries, the Spartan line broke. The perfect machines, faced with an enemy that fought with passion and cohesion, shattered. They were a hollow army. The algorithm, in its relentless quest to optimize the warrior, had erased the human being inside. Sparta was not defeated by the Thebans. It was defeated by its own pursuit of perfection. The system did not fail. It succeeded, and its success was total annihilation. The bracelets, the ultimate tool of control, became their tombstone. The data logs are all that remain, a silent record of a society that traded its soul for efficiency. A society that became so obsessed with measuring its strength that it forgot what strength truly was. And here we are. We look at the screen on our own wrists. We optimize our lives, quantify our friendships with likes, and allow algorithms to shape our reality, from the news we read to the people we meet. We are willingly putting on the bracelets. The story of Sparta isn't a history lesson. It is a blueprint, a prophecy. The ghost that haunted their machine is the same one that haunts ours. It is the unquantifiable, illogical, inefficient, and utterly essential spark of our own humanity. And we, too, are programming it to be obsolete. The question is, will we realize it before our own line breaks?